Tomorrow Thinking with Johann Alexi.
I'm still amazed, in fact, by many things. So to travel for me remains a joy, a source of daily happiness. Le Monde, the newspaper, asked me to write a column during the World Cup in Russia in 2018. And I spent, 4 hours at a small table. The presidential plane, there was Macron, there was Jean-Pierre Papin.
Did you meet Putin?
Putin was very clever. He showed up at the first game, and then he showed up at the final. But I met Mick Jagger also at the halftime of the game. And I never post anything on these stupid social medias. But I admit I couldn't resist posting the picture with Mick Jagger. Something is missing in this story. This is the idea of a European culture. I mean, something which could bind people more than business or traveling or politics. We should do a schnitzel map of Europe, for instance, because schnitzel
that's a cultural asset, actually. Yeah,
that's binding Europe. The EU now has huge challenges. I mean, Europe has to become a military power. It has to become more political. It has to be stronger economically, financially, technologically. So that's the missions of the EU. So basically, this idea of a European identity is not only a dream, but it's the necessity of a feeling of protection. And if you know who you are, if you know your story, the good aspects and the bad aspects, you can try at least to guess where you're going. But you won't go anywhere if you don't know where you're from.
Welcome to Tomorrow Thinking with Johann Alexi. Today I am truly delighted to welcome Olivier Guez, award-winning author, essayist and journalist whose work bridges literature, cinema, contemporary culture and political thought. Olivier won the renowned for his novel La Disparition de Joseph Mengele and the German Film Award for Best Screenplay for The People vs. Fritz Bauer. He writes for New York Times, Le Monde, FATS, and many more pivotal publications. I'm glad to have my long-standing friend with me here in Baden-Baden. Salut, Olivier.
Salut, Johan. Hi.
Hi. Do you remember when we first met in Berlin in fall 2005?
Of course I remember. I mean, I arrived in Berlin in early October 2005. I didn't know anyone. And so I thought that maybe I could meet a few people at the Institut Français, the French Institute. And that night I bumped into you. I remember this very well. You had a shaved head and I think a green suit or something like that.
I think you had a brown corduroy suit and big hair.
I did.
And a beard, a big beard.
Yes, now you have more than I have. And I still have a beard, but quite smaller, I guess. No, I remember very well. It was one of my first evening in Berlin.
Yeah, Institut Français in Berlin, I remember. And we bumped into each other like randomly in the entry space and we started talking. Mm-hmm. And that's 20 years ago and we're still friends. Amazing, right?
It's exactly 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think I looked at you, you seemed interesting, maybe you thought the same, and we started talking, and since we've been in contact, we've been meeting each other for something, exactly 20 years. Yeah.
Absolutely. We have a lot of similar stuff going on. We both have a connection to Europe, which is pretty intense, I would say. My mother is French with a Pied-Noir background. My father is German. I do live in Alsace, in a small village north of Strasbourg. You were born in Strasbourg, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was born in Strasbourg. My dad also comes from North Africa, from Tunisia. He's not a Pied-Noir. He's a true Tunisian Jew who left Tunisia in the early mid-60s and who went to Strasbourg to study medicine. And my mother was born in Strasbourg, but she has German and Austro-Hungarian origins.
You're traveling Europe, and Europe is a topic for you, and different perspectives. We're going to speak about this later. Right now, I want to speak with you about your Berlin years. Berlin Bohème around 2005 to 2010. How was it?
I missed the best years of the Berlin Bohème. I just arrived. I came to Berlin just at the very end of the spectrum. But I lived 5 years in Berlin, between 5 and 10, and I lived the transition years of Berlin, when Berlin became a kind of a more normal city. The Bohème started to leave at the time. It became more and more expensive, but this was a very, very strong experience for me. Somehow I had to live in Berlin. I had to live in Germany at a certain point of my life. I wanted to know more. I wanted to understand more. I wanted to live it on a daily basis. I wanted to live this experience. I mean, Berlin has still this reputation, even if the city has changed a lot. But it's difficult to believe how free this city was 20 years ago. And of course, before, between the fall of the wall and 2000, between 5 and 10, people used to come and go. Everything was pretty cheap. Everything was anarchical. Everybody was very alone. The winters were still terrible. I remember the first winter, it was something like -20, -25. You could do ice skating. And it was a planet on itself somehow. It was an island in the eastern part of Germany, in the former Prussia. And it was very intense. I wouldn't say that I was always happy. It's not an easy city. It's not an happy city. But for me, it was extremely important to be in the city, which was in fact at the center of European history, the whole 20th century. I mean, it started in Berlin somehow and it ended up in Berlin. And to see the transformation of the city, I also came for the music. I still love electronic music. And I mean, Paris is a great city, but it's very difficult to find the freedom. And at the time, if you wanted to look for freedom in Europe, you had to go to Berlin.
I remember we had some beautiful dinner parties at my house back then with our friends. We had people like André Saraiva from Paris, who was exhibiting at my gallery, a famous street artist, and later a guy at like famous hotels and nightclubs all over US. And
Le Baron.
The legendary Baron in Paris he was running, where the Bohème Chicaria was meeting. But also we had the musician Chili Gonzalez, who was my neighbor. The street artist JR was hanging out at my place. I remember at great nights. Also Christian Kracht, a famous author who wrote Faserland. He's now professor in Switzerland, you know.
But you knew many more cooler people than I did at the time.
Well, we were hanging out all together, man.
Yes,
I remember.
I met a few of these people. I mean, you arrived much earlier than I did in Berlin. And to be honest with you, I mean, I wanted to enjoy Berlin, but also to enjoy my Berlin. So it was also a very solitary Berlin. I had things to feel the city. One of my most beloved movie is the Wings of Desire by Wim Wenders. And I guessed I was extremely impressed by the images of Berlin. So the movie was shot just before the fall of the wall. And I was a bit like this, the two angels.
Himmel über Berlin in German,
Genau,
right?
Himmel über Berlin. And I was a bit like these angels at the beginning of my stay. I spent hours walking around Berlin, looking at Berlin, smelling the city, smelling the U-Bahn, for instance, which is a very, very special smell, especially when you go to the east. So I was like that. And also, I was kind of obsessed becoming a writer when I came to Berlin. I mean, I had the feeling that I was one of the only person in Berlin who worked, in fact. I mean, this experience has been, I would say, at the center of my life somehow. There is something before Berlin and after Berlin.
When you were in Berlin, you were mostly working as a journalist, right?
No. I took the chance. I was a journalist when I arrived in Berlin. I left the newspaper I used to work for in Paris. And in Berlin, I became a writer. I spent my life reading and writing. I mean, I wrote 2 books about German history. One about the history of the Jews in Germany after the Second World War till the beginning of the 21st century, and another book about the fall of the wall. So I was very obsessed by the German history, and by the history of Berlin. So it was, yeah. I have a certain nostalgia for these years and for the Berlin of the time.
What was your life before Berlin?
Well, I had a very kind of quiet and somehow boring childhood in Strasbourg till I was 18. Then I started moving. I spent 2 years in England. I spent 1 year at Sussex University in Brighton, and then another year at the London School of Economics. I also studied in Belgium at the College of Europe. And then I stayed a bit in Brussels. I stayed a bit in Paris. Then I spent 6 months in Nicaragua, in Managua. Then I started working in Paris when I used to, especially to report about the Middle East and the geopolitics of oil. And then I moved to Berlin. That was my life before.
Traveler, bohemian traveler.
I still have a very strong curiosity but also a certain distance to this curiosity. So I'm still amazed, in fact, by many things. So to travel for me remains a joy, a source of daily happiness because of this curiosity.
Tomorrow Thinking: Art, Economy, Society.
In 2012, you wrote a book about declining America called American Spleen. What was that experience? I know that you traveled America and discovered a new version of itself.
Well, this book is kind of interesting because it didn't interest anyone at the time. I think I sold less than 1,000 copies in France. It's the only book which was never translated to any other languages. Basically, after the Great Recession in 2008, I went to write a story for Le Monde about a farm in Northern California, close to Oregon. And there was this woofing movement at the time. I don't know if you know what is woofing.
What is that?
Basically, it was like working and in these kind of biological or biodynamic farms. And then, I mean, you could live there and you would be fed and all these kind of things. So I went there. I was very curious about this. I used to go a lot in the States at the time. And the people I met were all people graduated from good universities from the Eastern Coast. And because of the recession, and they had a kind of crisis of vocation. So they decided to give up everything and they started working in these kind of farms. And I was pretty amazed. So I wanted to know more, in fact, about what was going on in the States. And at the time, it was the beginning of these Tea Party movements. People started to get very angry because they had lost their houses. They had a big mortgage. And the banks, which had kind of abused of these people, had been saved by the state, but the people were really, really in dire strait. So this kind of anger started. And I got curious about this. So I wanted to meet these people, and I wanted to meet all these right or very right-wing think tanks which were playing with these ideas. So to meet all these people and to understand a bit more what was going on, I traveled from the Mexican border in Arizona to Chicago. So all through the Rocky Mountains and through the Great Plains. I had rented a Ford Mustang. I was on my own. And I got amazingly depressed by what I saw, by what I heard, and by what I felt. And I felt that we were losing America, or America was losing us. It was a different country, it was a different continent. We had other references, and I felt so much anger, so much violence, and I met so many people who were completely lost, in fact, completely lost. And I got completely depressed. That's why the book is also called American Spleen. It's the melancholy of the Americans I met, because basically, at the beginning of the 2010s, America had lived maybe the worst decade of its history. You had September 11, which meant that America was not protected anymore. Then you had the war in Iraq, Afghanistan and Iraq, especially Iraq. I mean, America had lied to everyone for nothing or for the bad reasons. And it was a kind of humiliation because it didn't go very far. I mean, it just provoked one crisis after the other. And then you had the financial crisis, which meant that the three pillars of American power were kind of collapsing at the same time. And I felt that we were losing America. But at the time, there was no charismatic leader for all these people. And then, of course, the charismatic leader came and got elected, and this is Donald Trump. But that was this idea of the book. But no one felt this at the time. I remember because I took part in a State Department program in 2004. So you have a kind of a club alumni thing in Paris, and I called them. I said, "Well, I just wrote a book about the decline of America," and they told me, "Are you joking? We don't want to hear that. This is not existing." So they didn't even let me speak about this. They didn't invite me. But now more and more people are mentioning this book to me. And then I didn't go back to the US for many years. I couldn't go there. It was very, very, very strong, and I didn't like it. I really felt kind of in danger somehow. And I mean, I had been to many, many, many countries. I'm not a war reporter at all, but this feeling of loneliness because the people I met were so aliens to me. This is something I'd never lived before, that I never lived after.
But you went back to Princeton recently as a professor.
Yes, I taught at Princeton the last semester, so winter and spring 25, so a long time after. When I came to Princeton, that was different. I mean, Princeton is a very civilized environment. The university is, I call it tweedy, this idea of tweed, everything is kind of elegant, everything is, people don't speak up too much. And it's very different from Columbia or the university, which where there had lots of violence and discussions. Princeton is not like that. But I mean, what I'd felt 14 or 15 years before, what I could see the impact and the consequences of the America I rediscovered at the beginning of this year. This violence, this country divided into two pieces. But it's different because, I mean, at the time, in 2011, when I went there, people were lost. The America where you go now, people don't have this feeling of being lost. I mean, the Trump partisans think they know where they're going, who they are. Because, I mean, the basis of Trump's power is this identity. I mean, he managed to become president because of this huge identity crisis. And on the other end, you have another identity thing. But the Democrats are extremely weak because they don't know exactly what they want to say. They're very divided about this identity thing. What brings together the partisans of Trump is this very strong American identity, how they define this American identity.
That's a great topic, and I think we could speak about this for a while. I mean, I'm sure we're going to come back a little bit on this later. I want to speak with you also about your recent movie, which has been put out, La Disparition de Joseph Mengele, with August Diehl in the main role. Big thing. How is that going?
Oh, it's not my movie. It's a movie adapted
on your book.
Exactly. Das Verschwinden des Joseph Mengele. I'm extremely lucky because Kirill Serebrennikov, who's the filmmaker, is a very gifted artist. He did something which is interesting and which is pretty rare, I would say, seldom for a book adaptation, because most of writers are not very satisfied with their adaptations. But in my case, Serebrennikov has been, on one hand, very faithful to the book, and on the other hand, it's truly his movie, his vision of this story. But I like it. I think it's interesting. It's different from the book. I mean, when you sell your rights, I mean, that means that you accept that someone is going to adapt your story. But I also adapted the work of historians. I mean, the first time I saw the movie, I was kind of tense, nervous, because I had no idea. I'd read the script, I'd worked with Serebrennikov, but I didn't write the script. That's his script. I mean, to read a script and then see a movie, it's completely different. I mean, it was a very, very, very good surprise. It's aesthetically, it's very strong. I mean, you suffocate when you see the movie. I mean, physically, it's an enduring sensation, I would say. I mean, the few people who have seen it for now, that's what they told me. That's also what I felt when I saw the movie.
I had a similar impression. It's like a long river you're flowing down. It's a black and white optic, and there's one passage in the movie which is really hard. It's directly in Auschwitz, where Mengele operates in the worst way imaginable with human beings that's done in colors. It's a very intense experience, to be honest. It's an abstraction of your book. It's picking up certain scenes and making, as I said, an abstraction of the book. It's a totally different product than the book, and both are beautiful works in their own respect, I find. Both are worth seeing, and there's no doubling really. And it's no surprise that for that book you got the Prix Renaudot in 2017 in Paris, which is one of the most relevant literature.
It's the chicest one.
The chicest one, which is
the Goncourt,
which is transmitted in the restaurant Drouot. Can you tell me how that scene goes when you get this prize and you show up in a bistro? And is it full of bohemian literature people and it's cool and they're smoking cigarettes? How is that working?
Not at all. Not at all. It's. I mean, that morning. I mean, you got very tense because you have no idea what's happening. It's a big scope for any writer. And that morning, I remember very well. I shut down my phone. I walked to my publishing house, but I had a very long walk. In fact, I didn't go straight. And I wanted to arrive when they would know if I got the prize or not. Basically, that day, which is the first Monday of November, the two most important literary prizes are announced. You have the Goncourt and you have the Renaudot. Yeah. And they're all given at chez Drouot. And basically, the Renaudot was created by some journalists in the 1920s. Next year is going to be the 100th birthday of the Renaudot, because the juries of the Goncourt were taking too much time or they didn't like each other, so they created a second prize. But it's given at the same time. So I arrived at my editor, climbed the stairs, he was there. I had no idea, because my editor is a kind of a dry man. He has a poker face. I didn't know at all. So at the end of the stairs, he told me, "C'est bon, tu l'as." It's crazy, like everything changes. I mean, these literary prizes, they still make the head of the news in France. It's kind of interesting. It's weird somehow. So basically, you arrived at Drouot, you have hundreds of reporters, TV, radio, newspapers, and you have some people eating at the restaurant. But it's not bohemian at all. It's a big thing. It's a big business thing also for the editors and the writers. The Goncourt, they eat with the winner, and the Renaudot, they don't eat with the winner. So I had lunch with my publishing house, and that was it. It was a nice day.
And from there, you enter La Haute Volée of France, obviously. That's what I heard. I was informed that you were invited by Macron to fly to Moscow to watch a soccer game, right?
Le Monde, the newspaper, asked me to write a column during the World Cup in Russia in 2018. And for some weird reasons, I told them that, okay, I'm spending the first 4 or 5 weeks of the competition in Russia, but for the semifinals and the final, I want to be in France. I wanted to be with my friends and whatever. So basically, after the quarterfinals, I came back to France, but then France was still there. I love football, but I'm not a fan, I'm not a supporter. I like football, so if a team is better than France, it's fine for me. I like the idea of the game. So I came back, and I thought about, I should tell Le Monde, maybe they should send me again. And so I was thinking about this, and I don't know, 10 minutes after, the phone rang, and that was the Élysée Palace, asking me, do you want to go to Russia with the president for the semi-final? So I went, I took his plane. Well, his plane took me, more I would say. And I spent, 4 hours at a small table. The presidential plane, there was Macron, there was Jean-Pierre Papin, who was a legend of French football of the late 80s and early 90s. And there was the sport minister of the time. And so we spent something like 3 or 4 hours together talking about everything and nothing. Also, sports, a lot of sport, but football.
Did you meet Putin?
Putin was very clever. He showed up at the first game, and then he showed up at the final. But then you wouldn't see him instead. He is clever because for people who didn't know, you wouldn't feel that you were living or visiting a dictatorship, because the dictator was never there, in fact. For once, everybody was very nice in Moscow, in the sense that, I mean, for people who know Moscow, policemen are not always very polite, or people working in museums are not very polite, or it can be a very rough city. It was a very clever kind of soft power move to attract people and to let them think that Russia is a nice, welcoming democracy.
Who else was there?
There was Viktor Orban, so the Prime Minister of Hungary. It's very interesting because when you sit in this part of a stadium like that, that means you're very, very important. So basically you can talk to anyone. They think you're very important. So at the halftime, I don't know, a little conversation with Viktor Orban as if we had met 20 years before, and he's a big soccer fan. I met Mick Jagger also at the halftime of the game. I mean, lots of extremely famous football players. But I especially remember Viktor Orban and Mick Jagger. And I never post anything on these stupid social medias, but I admit that I couldn't resist posting the picture with Mick Jagger. It was too big to miss. It happens once in a life.
Tomorrow Thinking. Europe in Motion.
I would love to speak a little bit about Europe, one of your main topics.
No, it's not my main topic. It is who I am, which is different.
That's well explained. I agree.
It's my, I would say it's my life. I mean, I live and see and perceive and feel as a European more than anything else, which is good because as a European you can be everything and nothing. But it's broader than as a French or as a German or as a whatever.
You published Le Grand Tour, a curated book with 27 authors, 27 stories. For me, I've been reading it on and off. It's next to my bed. It's a beautiful thing because you can travel Europe. It's a real adventure of the mind. I really enjoy this book. I can totally recommend it because you realize how diverse and romantic and beautiful and warm and interesting and full of perspective Europe is. It's a grand œuvre, I find. You start the preface with the sentence, "C'est absurde, presque suicidaire," which means this is absurd, almost suicidal.
Talking about the way this process of unification of Europe has been thought and made, in the sense that the European construction is a miracle when you think about European history or what's going on in the rest of the world. I mean, you have all these countries which had been fighting each other for centuries and centuries, and which at a certain point decide, okay, let's try something else. Let's try to cooperate instead of fighting each other. All well and good. Impressive construction. But something is missing in this story. This is the idea of a European culture. I mean, something which could bind people more than business or traveling or politics or European law or whatever. I mean, this idea that when you belong to a family, you have a common history. You share things, values and anecdotes and disputes also, but you share something. You have this flesh. What is missing, and this is what we pay for a very, very heavy price, this dimension is completely missing. Completely. It doesn't exist. So with the help of the French presidency of the European Union, so it was also a public initiative. So I gathered these 27 writers, one per member state, and I asked them to write a short story about a place in their own country which evokes European history, European culture, European society. It's a kind of a map of the European imagination, of the European psyche of the time, just before the beginning of the war in Ukraine. It was a great experience. I worked with great writers. It was a pleasure for me. But also, it was also a very bad sign in the sense that a book like that, 30 years ago, which would have been translated into something, I don't know, 15, 20 languages. I have great writers. I mean, for Germany, I have Daniel Kehlmann, who's probably the most famous writer in Germany. I have Colm Toibin, who's a star in the US and in Europe. I have Sophie Oksanen, who's also very well known. I mean, Laszlo Krasznahorkai, who could win, the Hungarian, who could win one day the Nobel Prize. I mean, truly great writers. This book has been translated into only one language, which is Dutch. There is no German version of it, no English one, no Spanish, no Italian. So on one end, it's a very positive enterprise. On the other end, it shows how people consider this idea of European culture, which is no one's going to buy it. So I don't take the risk of translating it and publishing it.
How is it coming that there's such a gap within the mentality of Europe to create, like you described, with a family having a similar taste of food or even wearing stuff or designing your house or having like a common culture which connects you also aesthetically, culturally? How is that missing in Europe? And how could they forget to create that, just creating like money and infrastructure, but not a certain style? What went wrong? I have the impression that it's one of our main topics today, why Europe is so weak.
First, we have to make a distinction between the EU and Europe. I mean, most of people, including me, when we say Europe, that means the EU. But Europe is very different and much bigger than the EU, which is an economic, a financial, and a political cobweb of institutions. That's very different. This European culture exists. I mean, some Europeans exist. I mean, people like you, like me, like other people, thanks God, who have been educated to various European countries, who have parents a bit this, a bit that. So you have this mix. Why culture was not included into this EU mechanism, this EU European unification process? Well, I think that at the beginning of this EU adventure, so in the 50s, to talk about European culture was a shame. European culture ended up in Auschwitz 5 or 10 years before. So this idea of a European civilization didn't exist anymore. It had reached a dead end. So the leaders of the time, they had a very pragmatic approach, which was good at the time, I think, which was to, well, let's make things function. So let's share coal and steel and iron and so everything which was used before to wage wars. So that's the beginning. But then, I think in the late 80s, early 90s, at the end of the Cold War, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, we missed a big opportunity because Europe was opening itself. Central Europe was joining the Western European family. So Europe was all together again for the first time since a very long time. And basically what the EU did was only an administrative, an economic, financial, legal process of admission, which is fine. I mean, it's an institution, it's an organization, more than an institution. This organization is made of institutions, all well. But one pillar was missing, this idea of a European family, this idea of a European civilization, this idea of a truly common European culture. And since then, we've been running after this. I mean, since then, Europe has lived one crisis after the other. The book was published in March 22, so exactly 1 week after the beginning of the war in Ukraine. It would have been kind of a shame to talk about European culture. So basically, we missed the opportunity when we had lots of time, money, and the idea that somehow this process had achieved great results.
You're also in your entry text for Le Grand Tour, you also speak about another void. You say, l'extermination des Juifs a laissé un vide immense. The extermination of the Jews has left an enormous void.
Physical void, intellectual void, moral void. I mean, you know, in Europe before the Second World War, you had two groups of people who were connecting the other groups of people. These two groups were the Jews and the Germans. You had Jews everywhere, and you had Germans in many, many countries. The Jews were exterminated, most of them, and the one who managed to escape went to the Americas, Northern America and South America, or to Israel. And the Germans were evacuated, were deported at the end of the war. So basically, these two groups we were connecting, the people of Europe, disappeared somehow. Very differently, but they disappeared. You had this process of emancipation, which had started at the end of the 18th century, and the Jews were some of the greatest agents of modernity, and especially in Central Europe, in this German part of Europe, which was, of course, Germany, but also the Austro-Hungarian Empire. But you had Jews in Romania, you had Jews in Yugoslavia. I mean, you had all this, the core of Europe, which is somehow the old Holy Roman Christian Roman Empire. So there's something between France and Russia. So this band of countries, the Jews were sometimes the main agents or some of the greatest agents of modernity. And all these people got killed or vanished or had to leave. This has never been replaced, of course. I mean, I love Vienna, for instance. Maybe I love Vienna more than Berlin somehow. But a city like Vienna, which was not even at the center of modernity, which invented modernity at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. I mean, you feel this void. But you feel the void everywhere. I mean, you have these plaques in front of the houses everywhere in Europe. And this is what remains of a great civilization. You have all these plaques. I mean, you have the names of people, some famous, some anonymous, who got deported. And this void will never be filled. Never.
I could tell after more than 20 years in Berlin that effectively there is something missing when you compare contemporary Berlin with pre-World War II Berlin culturally. There's a big lack. If you look at the salons, you had there mainly women in Berlin were holding the most amazing salons where people were speaking literature, singing, having music, discussing politics, doing business, like real beautiful cultural member clubs in their private houses. If you look at architecture, I mean, that's the most obvious thing in my opinion in Berlin. Everything is square and straight, like Rittersport, Schokolade. In Berlin, there's no creativity, no diversity compared to the beautiful old buildings you see from the time, what's left. Same in music. You had the most amazing musicians, influential people. And I feel that void in Berlin. I think it's a great example as well.
For sure. I mean, think about Warsaw, think about Prague, think about Budapest, think about all this. Yeah, this core of Europe has been destroyed somehow. And New York became the capital, the new center of arts around the 40s because of this, because some people had managed to escape. It became a great intellectual center because lots of Jews went to the US. I mean, take the example of Henry Kissinger, a German Jew who moved to America when he was a teenager. He's not an artist. Some people like him, some people hate him. He was such a German Jew, I would say, and he kept on talking with this very strong German accent. And he was so different from what used to be this optimistic way of seeing the world, this American thing. He brought the pessimistic, realistic worldview, Weltanschauung, from Europe and from as a Jew from Germany, as a German Jew. That's very interesting, this mixing. Yeah, this is part of my story. I was born in Strasbourg. I was always attracted by German culture. I love German cuisine, which is always very strange for a Frenchman. I mean, it's very interesting. Every time I do a lecture in Germany, any town, the Germans, they're pretty ashamed of this cuisine. They think that the French... so they always bring you to an international food restaurant or Italian. And I tell them, no, I want to eat local. I want to eat German because this is my Madeleine. I mean, I was mainly brought up by my grandmother, whose parents had German origins. And so my Madeleine is the German cuisine. I love it. I miss it. So that's why I asked you, for instance, to eat local tonight when I arrived in Baden-Baden.
Did you like your Wiener Schnitzel at Geroldsauer Mühle here in Baden-Baden?
It was a good one. I spent lots of time with my wife in Vienna a long time ago, and the first thing we did was to buy a schnitzel map.
A schnitzel
A
map.
schnitzel map is a fantastic
that's news
tool.
to me. Okay.
It's a fantastic tool. So basically, you have a map of Vienna, and they show you where to find the best schnitzel in Vienna. So the 20 districts of Vienna. So you have the schnitzel map. So we did, I don't know, we spent something like 1 month in Vienna, and we did all the dots of the schnitzel map.
How many?
I don't know. Maybe a schnitzel a day keeps the doctor away, something like that. So it was. So we. I mean, when I go back to my schnitzel map these days, I mean, it's like a map that I use for 20 years. I mean, it has been very used. It's not a gadget. It's something very important. So I recommend the schnitzel map. We should do a schnitzel map of Europe, for instance, because schnitzel
That's a cultural asset, actually. Yeah,
that's binding Europe. I mean, everywhere where the Austrians went, you have schnitzel. So la scaloppina milanese is a kind of a schnitzel. You have la scaloppina alla bolognese, which is also another kind of schnitzel. You have the schnitzel in Ljubljana, in Slovenia, which is exactly more or less the same as the one in Vienna. So we should do, for instance, big schnitzel map of Europe.
I totally agree. I saw that you eat your schnitzel with mustard, which is pretty Frenchy.
Well, I asked mustard, but they forgot.
Oh.
But which is very, yeah, that's true. When, for instance, some restaurants in Berlin or in Vienna, when I ask mustard with my schnitzel, they look at me as a barbarian. Which I might be actually too, but I like mustard as a French. So that's another European thing.
Yeah, that's another common thing we have.
Another
mustard.
example. German people, they eat pasta with salad on top or on the side, but at the same time. You show this to an Italian, he would nearly kill you for this. So this mixing is interesting. It's like the schnitzel with mustard. It's like the same story.
It's like Parmigiano on spaghetti vongole. That's a crime, obviously.
No, that's not even a crime. It's a punishment for yourself. It's different. Or it's like cappuccino after midday lunch, for instance.
At Borchert's in Berlin, they have like a vegan schnitzel, which is based on some vegetable. I think it's celery. I think it's pretty good if you take mustard with it.
Well, I don't know. I've never had a celery schnitzel. I haven't reached that point yet.
So let's save Europe's identity and soft power with schnitzel. I think it's a great plan. But maybe there's different ideas.
Maybe schnitzel could be a good symbol for Europe. I don't know, like super schnitzel or I don't know.
Yeah, or Euro schnitzel.
Euro schnitzel, yeah, why not?
Tomorrow thinking. Curating change.
I think Europe indeed has a problem with its identity, and I've been thinking honestly deeper about this. Why Europe is not having like a common event next to Eurovision Song Contest. Okay, fair enough. It's not so bad actually. I think it's very important. What's that?
It's neither not so good, but it's okay.
Yeah, but
it's
you know,
funny.
at least it's there, you know, and it has been around for a while, and it's. For me, that's Europe a little bit. Then there's soccer. But what do you do if you're not interested in soccer? You lose your identity. So what else could we do? I think the model of the ESC is not so bad. And I was frustrated when I saw that Putin realized the same and revived his old communist ESC version in Russia and made people conforming to him and his policies singing. I'm a little sad because I thought we could use that idea for Europe and rethink it in a different context, because you can go into different disciplines. It doesn't need necessarily to be music. We could have it for literature, for art, for movies. Like, why not having a competition where we look at each other and share what we can and what we do and what we cherish in each country?
I mean, this kind of existed at a certain time, but then we had a renationalization of debates and of everything. For instance, I never watched TV, but 2 weeks ago I had a look at the French TV channel, and I look at the news at 8 p.m. And I looked at the weather provisions, and I was amazed. So you have France, of course, but then You have all the islands, small or big. I mean, in the Pacific, in the Indian Ocean, in the Caribbean, and kind of what remains of our little empire. Let's put it this way. When you live in Strasbourg, you're more interested by the weather thing in Stuttgart, that what's going on in Martinique, and when you live in Biarritz, you're more interested by the weather in Spain. I think we need to make the distinction between the EU and Europe again. I mean, the EU now has huge challenges. I mean, Europe has to become a military power. It has to become more political. It has to be stronger economically, financially, technologically. So that's the missions of the EU. Then, of course, we should have, I don't know if it's a European competition or a food competition or a schnitzel competition, whatever, but this has to be private. I mean, the EU has other priorities. Maybe we can get some public funding, but the EU has other priorities. If we want to reinforce or recreate or use our amazing European heritage, we have to organize ourselves. Let's let the politics do whatever they have to do now, because these are huge challenges. I mean, Russia is a threat. America is not a threat anymore. Maybe it's also a threat. I guess it's a threat. You have the Islamist threat. You have the Chinese threat. You have the climate change threat. These are huge threats. Let's not bother the EU with this cultural thing. Let's do it ourselves, I would say.
Yeah, but the cultural thing is still highly relevant on a political level, because if people don't identify with Europe, they start going to vote the people who are against Europe, like AfD in Germany, for example, or Marine Le Pen in France, the whole extremists. And that's not a good sign. Or
Jean-Luc Mélenchon is also a threat. But this has to be this American idea of grassroots. I mean, we have to make it move. And then, of course, the culture is extremely important, and we won't go very far without the culture. But this would be unrealistic to think that the EU now is going to give priority to this. I mean, this should have been done before. We missed the opportunity. We talked about this before. So you, me, other people, artists, people of goodwill, or I don't know, cooks, sportsmen, whatever, we should organize this, and then we can move it to a more political level. But this would be unrealistic to ask Chancellor Merz or President Macron or Giorgia Meloni to do this now. This would be kind of ridiculous. People would not understand it.
In the 50s, the US were exporting the culture.
Mm-hmm.
I think we would need to create our own culture first. I know that in the 1950s, abstract expressionism and jazz music was brought to Europe to empower the value set of America and to create
the sex appeal of America.
Appeal also, and also to transport the values and the vibe of the States to other countries in the world. We would not even be able to do that as Europe. We do it through our products, but less through our movies. Our music is not relevant internationally, not necessarily. Our actors are not. Our literature, I don't know, maybe...
French literature is
not so bad, actually.
I mean, it's not a European thing. Well, literature is a very national or regional or local thing. I mean, thanks God, a French writer doesn't write like a German writer and an Italian writer. That's the richness of Europe, but it's also a weakness. But Europe has a strong soft power. I mean, everybody wants to move to Europe. You know, this is the joke during the Cold War, that no one has ever tried to go to Eastern Germany or to Romania. I mean, all the people try to leave this. And when you look at North Africa, I mean, no one wants to go to Algeria. You have lots of Algerians who want to move to France or to Europe. So Europe has a very strong appeal. I mean, look at the Ukrainians, who are Europeans, but they want to be part of the EU. So it's a very popular club. Everyone wants to join in. But most of us don't know and don't realize how privileged we are. We could have a very strong soft power if we would present ourselves as Europeans, or as Germans and Europeans, or French and Europeans, and if we would believe in us. I think that's the main thing. I mean, the Americans, after the Second World War, till more or less today, I mean, they really think they're exceptional. So their soft power is very strong. Our soft power could be extremely strong if we had a certain faith in ourselves, in our destiny, in our identity. But that's not the case. For some also obvious reasons.
I feel as a European with my French mom, my German dad, and my traveling between both countries, Germany and France, and then also all other countries I like and I work at, that my European identity is growing the more the Western world is going narrow. Saying that, I mean, the more from East, side Russia and China, and from the West, from side of the US, which is not the US anymore right now, I feel more European, and I sense that that's something which might happen to many Europeans, and that people might long for a cultural identification. We have a flag, we have the money, as said. We have so many different countries and such a rich culture, but I don't know if a superposed identity like in the States works, because we don't have the same languages, obviously, but I think it's totally worth to invest in the idea of a common identity, because it's so beautiful also. It's paradise to have a continent or a system, an idea, a concept, which is so full of different cultures and people and ideas and vibes and tastes and landscapes. I really want to believe and I want to invest in that idea. And I really still am wondering, what is that magic idea we can develop?
Well, the identity thing is crucial. I mean, since the beginning of the globalization process, which is somehow it's at its end today, but for more than 30 years, I mean, the West has been through a very strong identity crisis. That's the very idea of globalization, that you mix everything with everyone. And so lots of people got threatened in their identity. They would not understand. They would have the feeling that they don't have any, they vote or they try to pick things, but they have no influence at all. So basically this idea of a European identity is not only a dream, but it's the necessity of a feeling of protection. That's what the idea of identity is also, which is not hostile to others, but which means that you know who you are. And if you know who you are, if you know your story, the good aspects and the bad aspects, you can try at least to guess where you're going. But you won't go anywhere if you don't know where you're from. And what is your story, and what is your common story with a German, a Finn person, or a Dutch, or a Pole. And this is absolutely essential. And I think with globalization, which started in the 80s, and then with the explosion of internet, the social medias, and AI now, I mean, most of people I meet or I look at, because I keep on traveling, I have the feeling they're completely lost. Completely lost. They have no idea who they are. They have no idea where they're from. They have no idea what they eat. They have no idea of anything. They're completely kind of overwhelmed by everything. And this European idea would not resolve everything, but it would help, in fact, people to feel a bit better, to have this idea that they feel somehow, I think, protected. Protected is a very important word, but in a very positive way, not in a negative, not in the idea of excluding whoever, but I mean, if you want to integrate people, because we're going to have lots of migrations, Western European countries have completely changed in the last 30 years demographically. If you want to integrate people, you have to know who you are. Otherwise, you can't welcome anyone. But again, in a positive way. I mean, if you look at European history, what are the lessons from the cradle of our civilization, which is Athens in the 5th century before Christ? What is it? What means Athens? It means, for me, freedom, tolerance, and civism. You can't have freedom and tolerance if you don't have civism, the respect of the laws. And these three ideas, you can find them all around European history, from one city to the other. And we've lost this idea. And this European identity is extremely extremely important, but we have to go back to the roots. We have to give the people that they're not completely lost. Otherwise, we're really going to lose ourselves. We're going to be swallowed up by the Americans, which is already the case, by the Chinese. That's a true threat.
I totally agree, Olivier. I feel that I speak with a lot of specialists from political sciences and business and research centers and think tanks, and what's happening is very obvious. That's why I think it's really urgent to speak about that issue of Europe and its identity. I think important is also to create places where people can meet, right? Interesting enough, we're sitting in Baden-Baden, and this has been traditionally a place where people have been meeting. For example, in the 19th century, it was a very well-known place for creatives and intellectuals. You had Dostoevsky, who lived here, and Clara Schumann, Johannes Brahms, which had a house here in Gerolzau, Leo Tolstoy, Anton Chekhov. Then we have contemporary scene, Museum Frida Burda, which is like a high-end museum showing Andreas Gursky or artists like JR, for example. I curate big exhibitions in the public art field. Last year with Erwin Wurm here in the city. So you see, it's really high-end for a little town and has the potential maybe to be, again, a platform for European meeting structure. So I invite creatives and people who want to invest in this idea to think about Baden-Baden, the center of Europe.
I think, Baden-Baden used to be in the 19th century a true center of European culture. As you said, lots of artists gathered in Baden-Baden. It was a very free city. And actually, Baden-Baden would be a great center to organize a forum for European culture. Let's start these discussions. I think Baden-Baden has the infrastructures. It is big enough and tiny enough, in fact, to create this feeling of community. Because, if you gather people in Paris or in London, you won't make anything. There are too many things, there are too many people, and if you gather people for 3 days in Baden-Baden, people will meet, people will speak, people will have fun, people will drink, this will be the beginning of a very strong process, I think. So Baden-Baden, that kind of European city would be a great center to start this the thinking and these discussions about a European culture. So let's try to do it, I would say. Maybe that's the beginning of a long process, but a very interesting process.
Tomorrow thinking. Truth is capital.
As a next point, we're speaking about my artwork. It's called Truth is Capital. We're sitting in front of this red painting right now. For me, it's a little difficult to speak about my own work. That's why my wife, Jana van Helling, who is a curator, will give you an intro.
We're talking about the work Truth is Capital by Johann Alexis. He's using pigment and binder as technique. And you are in front of this huge red painting. And it's basically a red surface you're diving into. Only when you take a second look, you recognize the words written on it in red letters. Truth is capital. So it's red letters on a red surface, meaning you're more sensing those words than you actually see them. The words don't involve a specific meaning. They're open to interpretation of each viewer. And the artist himself generates those words during a state of meditation.
I think it's interesting because first you have this red thing. That's my feeling. It's completely spontaneous. Red, you were talking about some Russian writers. Red in the Russian tradition, if you look at the icons, it's the color of the holy color. So you're playing with this color first. Then it's written truth, but it's kind of vanishing. The truth is vanishing, and then in big letters you have capital. You can read it at least in two senses. Well, the first one, which is truth is very important. But if you replace in German the C by the K, you have truth is money, capital, das Kapital, Karl Marx. And this is what's going on. I mean, all the social medias are using truth as capital with a big K. And you're using also the red. It's not exactly the Marxist red. It's a bit lighter, I would say. But the whole thing, these were my impressions when I discovered the painting, that you can especially play with the holiness of truth, the holiness of capital, which is the main god of today, at least in the West. And the whole thing is interesting, I would say.
So interesting to realize, with all the talks we had about this work, how different people look at it. I think there's obviously like more than 20 or 30 ways to read a text and to put it in context with the color. It's beautiful to think about truth, I think, and capital. And also there's different styles of capital, right? There's social capital, there's economic capital, there's psychological capital. There's so many sorts of it. And truth can be used as a title for an online platform by someone. And it could also be something which is at your heart and important and relevant. And then there's 100 ways to play it.
But also, I mean, truth doesn't mean anything anymore. I mean, you can change. I mean, for most of people, then we go back to this idea of people are completely lost because they think that there is no truth. Or there used to be a kind of a center of truth. I mean, you could play with the truth. You can destroy the truth, like in Stalin time or Hitler time, but you had a kind of a center. The truth was at the center. There is no center anymore. There is no truth anymore. You can do whatever you want with AI.
I have the impression that truth is nowadays connected to values, to all sorts of values, and that's dogmatic. I mean, instead of opening your eyes and looking at the world and saying, that's truth, people get caught in concepts.
I think also truth has been replaced by transparency, which is a very different thing.
In which sense?
I mean, if you look at the social medias, I mean, you can play with truth. It's not even lying, but it's, I mean, you're organizing your life as if it was a movie. I mean, most of people, you know, they show the best part of themselves and their holidays and their friends and how fun life is and how great the food is. But most of people, I don't know if most of people have understood this, but behind this, of course, it's not like that. And so this is a certain idea of truth, which for me has been replaced by this idea of transparency, that you have to show everything. But when you show everything, that doesn't always mean that you show the truth. And this is, I think, also one of the tipping points which happened in the 25 years of this century. Every time you ask someone and everyone has a different opinion or what is thinking is a reaction, I think it's a good sign for your painting.
It's a good sign to see that we are all unique.
Is it a good sign?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Subjectivity is
yeah.
pretty good if
Yes.
it's real.
If it's real, yeah.
Tomorrow Thinking. An artist meets the world.
We were speaking about this earlier at the Schnitzel at the restaurant. Can you tell me what makes you happy?
Aside from a good schnitzel, many things. I'm very lucky with this because lots of things make me happy. Very little things. I have simple taste. But for instance, today I came from Montélimar in the south of France, driving, and to wake up very early and start my journey before the sun goes up, well, especially a day like this where it never showed up, but I mean, that's the idea, when you know it's still dark, and to really hit the road. That's, for instance, something which made me happy today, to drive along the roads of France, of Europe, and to enjoy this freedom. I think Europeans have not understood yet that maybe we might be the last free continent. We should enjoy this. And that's just a little, not very interesting example of the freedom we have, and the freedom, for instance, to go from Strasbourg to Kiel, crossing a big European river, as if we were going to the nearest neighborhood. That's a great chance, and this made me happy.
It's beautiful. Last question.
It's true. That's true. Yeah. It's sincere.
You experienced it. Where do we meet next, and what are we going to do?
Maybe we meet again soon in Baden-Baden to launch this European Forum for Culture, or whatever we call it. Maybe we give it, a Turgenev Forum. Or Turgenev is an interesting example because a Russian he was a true pro-Western Russian. So, bridging the two sides of the continent. But I don't know, we can think about this. So that's an option. And if everything goes badly, as it could be also, let's meet, Buenos Aires, Montevideo. It's going to be fun too. It's going to be interesting.
Are you going to show it?
I might.
Sounds fun.
You have the also very good schnitzel in Buenos Aires. It's Milanesa. So we're going back to this European roots.
Here we go. Olivier, merci beaucoup.
Merci, Johan. Danke schön.
And bonne route through Europe.
Thank you.
Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Tomorrow Thinking with Johan Alexi, a podcast developed in the context of the BBUG Fellowship. Producer, Malcolm Gumpf. More podcasts and info at tomorrow-thinking.com. Thank you.